German Shepherd drags sleeping baby out of house at 3 a.m. Parents follow in shock. The house is on fire. David screamed into his phone, his voice cracking with terror as flames erupted from their foundation and crawled up the exterior walls. "Fire at 1247 Maple Street. Please hurry!" Sarah gasped as she watched orange tongues of fire lick at Emma's nursery window, the very room where their daughter had been sleeping just minutes before. Rex barked frantically as if urging them to look and understand the danger they'd narrowly escaped. When Sarah tried to rush toward Emma, Rex intercepted her path, gently carrying the baby to a safe spot near their garden shed before turning back toward the burning house, his protective instincts still in overdrive. "She's safe now, baby girl," Sarah sobbed, clutching Emma to her chest as tears streamed down her face. "Rex, no, stay back," David shouted desperately as their heroic German shepherd seemed determined to return to the flames, his loyalty pushing him toward danger even as his family was finally out of harm's way. If this incredible story of Rex's heroic rescue moved you, please subscribe for more amazing true stories. Like this video to help others discover it, and listen to our complete audio collection of heartwarming animal rescue tales. Your support helps us share more stories that celebrate the extraordinary bond between humans and their four-legged heroes. The baby's scream pierced the pre-dawn silence of Maple Street like a knife through glass. Sarah Mitchell jolted awake in her king-sized bed, her heart hammering against her ribs as she registered the sound that no mother should ever hear her 6-month-old daughter Emma crying in terror somewhere outside their house. At 3:17 a.m. on this humid June morning in Millbrook, Tennessee, the suburban neighborhood lay shrouded in darkness, broken only by the occasional streetlight casting long shadows across manicured lawns. "David!" Sarah shook her husband violently, her voice cracking with panic. "Emma's outside. She's outside the house." David Mitchell, a 34-year-old insurance adjuster, struggled to consciousness as his wife's words registered. Through their bedroom window, they could hear their daughter's cries growing more distant, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of their German Shepherd Rex barking frantically. The massive dog's deep, urgent howls echoed through the quiet subdivision, a sound that would wake neighbors 3 houses down. Sarah stumbled out of bed, her bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor as she rushed to Emma's nursery. The sight that greeted her defied all logic and reason. The crib stood empty, its pink polka dot sheets twisted and hanging over the rail as if something had dragged them. The nightlight cast an eerie glow over scattered stuffed animals and an overturned bottle of baby powder that had spilled across the changing table. The windows still locked. David gasped, checking the latches with trembling fingers. How did she get outside? Through the nursery window, they spotted Rex in their backyard, his black and tan coat gleaming under the motion sensor floodlight that had activated. The 4-year-old German Shepherd stood protectively over a small bundle of pink blankets near their garden, shed his ears pinned back and his massive head lowered in an aggressive stance they had never seen before. Emma's cries echoed across the lawn, but Rex wouldn't let them approach. "What the hell is he doing?" David shouted, grabbing his cell phone and a baseball bat from their bedroom closet. "Rex has Emma." Sarah's bare legs carried her down the stairs 3 at a time, her nightgown catching on the banister as she flew toward the back door. Behind her, David's heavy footsteps thundered through the house and she could hear him calling 911 even as they both ran. The digital clock on their microwave glowed 3 to 19 a.m. as Sarah's trembling fingers struggled with the deadbolt on their patio door. The humid Tennessee air hit them like a wall as they burst onto their deck, the smell of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass mixing with something else, something sharp and chemical that made Sarah's nose burn. Rex stood his ground 20 yards away, his body positioned between the baby and the house, his dark eyes reflecting the security lights as he watched his owners with an intensity that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Rex, bring her here," Sarah commanded, but the dog's response was a low, rumbling growl that made both parents freeze in their tracks. 3 hours earlier, the Mitchell family had settled into their typical Sunday evening routine in their 2-story colonial home on Maple Street. Sarah, a pediatric nurse at Millbrook General Hospital, had just finished her weekend shift and was exhausted from dealing with a particularly difficult case involving a child with severe respiratory distress. David had spent the day working in their backyard installing a new deck railing that he'd been promising to fix for months. Rex, their beloved German Shepherd, had been with the family since he was 8 weeks old. They'd adopted him from a local breeder after Sarah's miscarriage 3 years earlier, hoping that caring for a puppy might help heal the wounds of their loss. The dog had proven to be exceptionally intelligent and protective, completing basic obedience training with flying colors and showing an almost supernatural ability to sense when Emma was in distress, often alerting Sarah to the baby's needs before she even cried. The house itself was a 1990s construction with an open floor plan central air conditioning, and what their realtor had assured them was a state-of-the-art electrical system. David had been particularly proud of the home's energy efficiency, boasting to neighbors about their low utility bills and the updated circuit breakers that had been installed just 2 years before Emma's birth. Earlier that evening, David had been troubleshooting an intermittent problem with their basement electrical panel. For the past week, they'd noticed occasional flickering lights and a strange humming sound coming from the utility room. He'd planned to call an electrician on Monday, but the issue seemed minor, just old wiring settling, he told Sarah, with the confidence of someone who'd watched enough DIY YouTube videos to consider himself handy. Sarah had put Emma to bed at 8:30 p.m., following their established routine of a warm bath bottle feeding and 20 minutes of rocking in the nursery, while soft lullabies played from the white noise machine. The baby had been sleeping through the night for the past month, a blessing that both parents cherished after months of sleep deprivation. Rex had taken his usual position on the carpet beside Emma's crib, where he'd appointed himself as the family's unofficial guardian. The first sign that something was wrong came at 11:45 p.m. when Rex began pacing the hallway outside the nursery. Sarah had noticed the dog's restlessness when she got up for a glass of water, but attributed it to the thunderstorm that weather forecasters had predicted for later that night. German Shepherds were known for their sensitivity to barometric pressure changes, and Rex had always been anxious during storms. By 2:30 a.m., Rex's pacing had intensified. The dog had begun making soft whimpering sounds and scratching at the nursery door, behavior that was completely out of character for the normally well-behaved animal. David had gotten up to investigate, finding Rex standing alert beside Emma's crib with his nose raised, sniffing the air repeatedly. When David tried to guide the dog back to his bed in the living room, Rex had resisted planting his 90-pound frame firmly beside the baby's sleeping form. The inciting incident occurred at exactly 3:15 a.m. when Rex's internal alarm system triggered a response that would seem inexplicable to his human family. The dog's acute sense of smell, capable of detecting odors at concentrations nearly 100,000 times lower than what humans could perceive, had picked up the distinct scent of electrical fire beginning to smolder in the walls behind Emma's nursery. The odor was so faint that it wouldn't register on human senses for another several minutes. But to Rex, it represented an immediate and deadly threat to the small human he'd been genetically programmed to protect. Without hesitation, Rex had carefully gripped the corner of Emma's blanket in his powerful jaws and begun the delicate process of extracting the baby from her crib. His movements were precise and controlled, using the same gentle mouth pressure he'd been trained to employ when carrying a tennis ball. Emma's weight, barely 15 pounds, presented no physical challenge for the strong dog, but the emotional weight of what he was doing, acting against his training to never disturb the baby's sleep, created an internal conflict that manifested in his anxious whimpering. The journey from the nursery to the backyard had taken Rex less than 2 minutes, but each step had been calculated to ensure Emma's safety. He'd navigated the stairs by placing his back feet carefully on each step, while keeping his head elevated to maintain the baby's position. The doggy door that David had installed in the kitchen had provided the perfect exit route, allowing Rex to transport Emma outside without the noise and delay of trying to wake the sleeping parents. Now, as Sarah and David stood on their deck in their pajamas, staring at their dog, who had seemingly lost his mind, the chemical smell in the air was growing stronger. Rex's protective stance over Emma wasn't aggression toward his family. It was a desperate attempt to keep them away from a danger they couldn't yet comprehend. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice crackled through David's phone speaker as he kept his eyes fixed on Rex and Emma in the backyard. My dog has taken my baby outside. David said, his voice strained with disbelief. I don't understand what's happening. The dog won't let us near her. Sir, I need you to stay calm. Is the child injured? Sarah could hear Emma's cries, but they sounded more like normal fussing than distress. She doesn't sound hurt, Sarah called out, but Rex won't move. He's never acted like this before. The dispatcher continued gathering information while Sarah made another attempt to approach Rex. The moment she stepped off the deck, the German Shepherd's demeanor shifted dramatically. His ears flattened against his head, and he emitted a low, warning growl that made Sarah's blood run cold. This wasn't the gentle family pet who helped Emma learn to crawl by, lying patiently while she climbed over him. This was a dog operating on pure protective instinct. Ma'am, I'm sending animal control and paramedics to your location, the dispatcher announced. Can you describe the dog's behavior in more detail? David watched Rex's eyes darting between the family and the house behind them. He keeps looking back at the house, David observed, like he's watching for something. That's when Mrs. Henderson from next door appeared at the fence line, her gray hair in curlers and a ratty bathrobe wrapped around her thin frame. At 73, Eleanor Henderson had lived on Maple Street longer than anyone and had seen her share of neighborhood emergencies. What in heaven's name is going on over there? She called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to knowing everyone's business. Rex took Emma outside and won't give her back, Sarah replied, her voice breaking with frustration and fear. Mrs. Henderson squinted at the scene, then suddenly pressed her nose against the fence. "David, do you smell that?" For the first time, David lowered his phone and really concentrated on the air around them. Beneath the familiar scents of their garden and the humid night air, there was definitely something wrong. The sharp, acrid smell was getting stronger, and it seemed to be coming from their house. "That's electrical fire," Mrs. Henderson announced with certainty. "I worked for the fire department for 30 years as a dispatcher. Rex is trying to tell you something." As if responding to his name, Rex looked directly at Mrs. Henderson and let out a single sharp bark. Then he gently nudged Emma with his nose, repositioning the baby slightly farther from the house while keeping his protective stance. Sarah's nursing training kicked in as the pieces began falling into place. "David, what were you working on in the basement today?" "Just the electrical panel," David replied, his face paling as understanding dawned. The flickering lights. From somewhere inside their house came a subtle popping sound, barely audible but unmistakable to anyone who'd experienced electrical problems. Rex's ears perked up immediately, and he began backing away from the house while still carrying Emma in her blanket. "We need to get away from the house," Sarah said, her medical training overriding her maternal panic. "If there's an electrical fire in the walls—" The sound of sirens began echoing through the neighborhood as multiple emergency vehicles responded to their call. Red and blue lights strobed across the houses on Maple Street as a fire truck, ambulance, and police cruiser rounded the corner in formation. Rex's protective posture relaxed slightly at the sound of approaching help, but he still wouldn't allow Sarah and David to come closer. Captain Mike Rodriguez of the Millbrook Fire Department was the first to reach the backyard. A 20-year veteran with extensive experience in residential fires, he immediately assessed the situation with the practiced eye of someone who had seen similar scenarios before. "German shepherds have an incredible sense of smell," he told the worried parents. "If he's keeping you away from the house, there's probably a good reason." Rodriguez approached Rex, slowly speaking in calm, low tones. "Easy, boy. We're here to help." To everyone's surprise, Rex allowed the fire captain to come within a few feet, though he maintained his protective position over Emma. "Can you smell the electrical fire?" Rodriguez asked David. David nodded, the acrid scent now obvious even to his less sensitive human nose. "It's getting stronger." "We need to evacuate immediately," Rodriguez declared. "If there's an active electrical fire in the walls, this whole structure could be compromised within minutes." As if summoned by his words, a small wisp of gray smoke began curling out from under the eaves of the house near Emma's nursery window. The sight sent a chill through Sarah's entire body as she realized what could have happened if Rex hadn't acted when he did. Paramedic Jessica Chin, a petite woman with kind eyes and steady hands, made the next breakthrough with Rex. "I'm going to check the baby," she announced, pulling on latex gloves. "Rex, I'm here to help Emma." The dog seemed to understand something in her tone and professional demeanor. For the first time since the ordeal began, Rex stepped aside, allowing Chin to kneel beside Emma and conduct a quick assessment. The baby was cold but unharmed, her cries subsiding as Chin wrapped her in a fresh blanket from the ambulance. "She's perfectly fine," Chin announced, and Sarah felt her knees nearly buckle with relief. But their relief was short-lived. A sharp cracking sound came from inside the house, followed by the unmistakable glow of flames behind the nursery window. The electrical fire that had been smoldering in the walls for hours was finally breaking through into the living spaces of their home. "Everyone needs to move to the street now," Captain Rodriguez commanded. "This is no longer a precautionary evacuation." Rex, his job apparently completed, trotted alongside the paramedic as she carried Emma toward the ambulance. For the first time in 20 minutes, the dog's tail wagged slightly, though his alert expression suggested he was still monitoring the situation for any additional threats. The revelation hit David like a physical blow as he stood on the street, watching flames engulf his daughter's nursery window. Rex hadn't suffered some kind of psychological break or suddenly turned aggressive. The dog had detected the early stages of an electrical fire that could have killed Emma and potentially the entire family within minutes. "How long was the fire burning before he took her out?" Sarah asked Captain Rodriguez, who was coordinating with his crew as they deployed hoses toward the house. Rodriguez checked his watch and calculated the timeline. "Based on what you're telling me about when the dog's behavior changed, probably 2 to 3 hours of smoldering before it broke through the drywall. German Shepherds can detect smoke at concentrations we can't even measure with our equipment." Fire Chief Patricia Walsh arrived on scene and immediately took charge of the operation. A veteran of 30 years with the department, she'd seen similar cases where pets had alerted families to dangers they couldn't perceive. "This is exactly the kind of scenario we train for," she told the Mitchell family. "Electrical fires are particularly dangerous because they can burn inside walls for hours before becoming visible." The turning point came when Fire Inspector Tom Bradley emerged from his preliminary investigation of the basement electrical panel. His expression was grim as he approached the family with a clipboard full of notes and several photographs on his phone. "Mr. Mitchell, when did you last have this electrical system inspected?" Bradley asked. David's face flushed with embarrassment. "We had some work done 2 years ago when Emma was born, but I haven't had it formally inspected since we bought the house. The main panel shows signs of significant overheating," Bradley explained, showing them photos of blackened circuit breakers and melted wire casings. "This wasn't a sudden failure. The system has been deteriorating for months, possibly years. The fire started behind the nursery wall where several overloaded circuits converge." Sarah felt her legs go weak as the full implications hit her. If Rex hadn't taken Emma out, the fire would have spread through the wall cavity and into the nursery within minutes, Bradley confirmed. "Given the time of night and how deeply most people sleep, your family likely wouldn't have woken up until it was too late." Chief Walsh nodded grimly. "We see this pattern repeatedly. House fires that start between 2 and 4 a.m. have the highest fatality rates because people are in their deepest sleep cycle. Without early warning, families often don't have time to escape." The moment that changed everything came when Dr. Amanda Foster, an animal behaviorist who volunteered with the fire department, arrived to assess Rex's condition. She'd been called in to determine whether the dog might pose any ongoing threat to the family or if his behavior indicated some kind of medical issue. "This is actually a textbook example of breed-specific protective behavior," Dr. Foster explained as she observed Rex, who was now calmly sitting beside Emma's carrier near the ambulance. German Shepherds were originally bred to protect flocks from predators, often making life-or-death decisions without human guidance. Rex didn't take Emma outside because something was wrong with him. He took her outside because something was wrong with your house. David stared at their dog with new understanding, so he knew what he was doing the whole time. Not consciously in the way humans understand planning, Dr. Foster clarified, but his instincts told him that Emma was in immediate danger, and he responded the only way he could. The fact that he kept you away from the house suggests he was still detecting threats even after removing Emma from the immediate danger zone. Sarah knelt down beside Rex, who had remained remarkably calm throughout the emergency response. For the first time since the ordeal began, she was able to stroke his head without any resistance. "You saved our baby," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The dog's response was a gentle nuzzle against her hand and a soft whine that seemed to convey his own relief that the crisis was over. But the night's revelations weren't finished. Inspector Bradley returned from a more thorough examination of the house, with news that would reshape everything the Mitchell family thought they knew about their home and their safety. "The electrical problems aren't limited to the nursery area," Bradley announced. "I'm finding evidence of chronic overheating throughout the system. The living room, kitchen, and master bedroom all show signs of dangerous deterioration. This house should have been condemned months ago." Chief Walsh stepped forward with the official determination. "I'm declaring this structure uninhabitable until a complete electrical renovation can be completed. You'll need to find alternative housing while the repairs are made." The weight of their new reality settled over Sarah and David like a heavy blanket. Not only had they nearly lost their daughter, but they'd lost their home as well. Everything they'd built over the past 5 years was either destroyed or inaccessible, and they faced months of displacement while contractors rebuilt their electrical system from scratch. But as Sarah looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, and at Rex, sitting alertly beside them like a guardian angel with fur, she realized that they'd actually gained something invaluable. They'd learned that their family extended beyond the human members, and that sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected sources. The point of no return had been crossed. There was no going back to their old life, their old house, or their old assumptions about safety and protection. From this moment forward, everything would be different. The first major challenge came at 6 a.m. when the Red Cross volunteer coordinator arrived to discuss temporary housing options. The Mitchell family stood in the parking lot of a nearby Denny's restaurant still in their pajamas, with Emma sleeping in her carrier and Rex lying alertly beside them. The reality of their situation was beginning to sink in. They were essentially homeless, with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a diaper bag that Sarah had grabbed from the ambulance. "We have emergency shelter space available at the community center," explained Linda Morrison, a Red Cross disaster response specialist who'd worked with fire victims for over a decade. "But I need to inform you that pets aren't typically allowed in emergency housing facilities." Sarah's heart sank. After Rex had literally saved their lives, the thought of separating from him felt like a betrayal of the highest order. "There has to be another option," she insisted. David was already making phone calls to family members, but the responses weren't encouraging. His parents lived in a retirement community with strict no-pet policies, and Sarah's sister had severe allergies that made hosting Rex impossible. Their closest friends, the Johnsons, were dealing with their own family crisis, and couldn't accommodate overnight guests. The complications multiplied when Inspector Bradley delivered additional devastating news. The structural damage is more extensive than our initial assessment indicated, he reported. The fire weakened several support beams, and we're finding evidence that the electrical problems may have compromised the home's foundation systems as well. This isn't going to be a simple rewiring job. Insurance adjuster Frank Henley arrived at 8 a.m. with forms that would determine their financial future. A serious man in his 50s with steel gray hair and calculating eyes, Henley began documenting the damage while asking pointed questions about the home's maintenance history. "Mr. Mitchell, you mentioned that you'd been experiencing electrical problems for several weeks?" Henley noted his pen poised over his clipboard. Why wasn't a licensed electrician called to inspect the system? David felt the weight of judgment in the question. "I thought it was minor, just some old wiring settling. I was planning to call someone this week." Henley murmured, making notes that David couldn't read. Insurance companies are very particular about claims involving fires that could have been prevented through proper maintenance. The implications were clear. Their insurance claim might be denied if the company determined that negligence had contributed to the fire. Without insurance coverage, the cost of rebuilding could easily exceed $200,000 money they simply didn't have. Meanwhile, Emma was beginning to show signs of stress from the disrupted routine. She'd been fed and changed, but the unfamiliar environment and her parents' obvious anxiety were affecting her normally calm demeanor. She fussed continuously, refusing to settle even when Sarah held her, and Rex seemed to pick up on the baby's distress, pacing nervously around the family. Dr. Foster, the animal behaviorist, had remained on scene to monitor Rex's behavior and provide guidance to the family. "He's experiencing secondary stress," she explained. "Rex knows his job isn't finished. Your family is still in crisis, and he's trying to figure out how to protect you from threats he can't identify or address." The situation deteriorated further when news crews arrived. Someone had tipped off the local television station about the hero dog story, and reporters were eager to capture footage of the family for the evening broadcast. The attention felt invasive and overwhelming, particularly when they were still trying to process what had happened to them. "We just want to tell our viewers about this amazing story of canine heroism," explained Channel 7 reporter Amanda Cross, her perfectly styled hair and professional makeup a stark contrast to the Mitchell family's disheveled appearance. "Could we get a quick interview about how Rex saved your family?" Sarah found herself torn between gratitude for Rex's recognition and frustration with the media circus surrounding their personal tragedy. "We're not ready to talk," she told the reporter firmly. "We're still dealing with the immediate crisis." But the reporters weren't easily discouraged. They interviewed neighbors, fire department officials, and anyone else willing to share their perspective on the story. Mrs. Henderson, never one to miss an opportunity for attention, provided extensive commentary about Rex's character and the family situation. The breaking point came when David's employer, Millbrook Insurance Services, called to discuss his work situation. "David, we've seen the news coverage," his supervisor Mark Brennan explained over the phone. "Obviously, we're concerned about our employees, but we also need to discuss how this situation might affect your ability to fulfill your responsibilities." David felt his stomach drop. As an insurance adjuster, he was expected to be available for emergency calls and maintain a professional image. Being homeless and dealing with his own insurance crisis created obvious conflicts of interest that his company couldn't ignore. "I need some time to sort out temporary housing," David said. "Maybe a week or two to get stabilized." "I understand the situation is difficult," Brennan replied, "but we can't hold your position indefinitely. If you can't return to work within 5 business days, we'll need to discuss other arrangements." The threat was clear. David was facing the possibility of losing both his home and his job within the same week. As the morning progressed, the family's options continued to narrow. The Red Cross shelter would only accept them without Rex hotels that allowed pets were beyond their budget for extended stays, and the few family members who might help were either unwilling or unable to accommodate their situation. Rex seemed to sense the mounting tension in his humans. His pacing intensified, and he began exhibiting behaviors that Dr. Foster recognized as signs of extreme stress in working dogs. "He's trying to solve a problem he doesn't understand," she explained. "Rex knows his family is in distress, but he can't identify a specific threat to neutralize or a clear action to take." The darkest moment came when Sarah broke down, completely overwhelmed by the cascade of problems that seemed to have no solutions. Sitting on the curb outside the restaurant with Emma in her arms and Rex pressed against her side, she finally allowed herself to cry with the full force of her exhaustion and fear. "I don't know what we're going to do," she sobbed to David. "Everything's gone, everything." David knelt beside his wife, his own composure finally cracking under the pressure. They were educated, middle-class professionals who'd always believed they were prepared for life's challenges. But nothing had prepared them for the complete upheaval of losing their home, potentially their income, and their sense of security, all in a single night. Rex, sensing his humans' distress at its peak, did something that surprised everyone. He stood up, walked a few steps away from the family, and let out a long, mournful howl that echoed through the restaurant parking lot. It was a sound of pure grief and frustration, the cry of a protector who had done everything right but couldn't shield his pack from the ongoing consequences of survival. The howl seemed to break something open in both Sarah and David. In that moment, they realized they weren't facing this crisis alone. They had each other, they had Emma, and they had Rex, a dog, who had proven he would literally risk his life to protect their family. That's when the phone call came that would change everything. The call came from an unexpected source, Millbrook General Hospital, where Sarah worked as a pediatric nurse. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the head of pediatrics and Sarah's supervisor, had seen the morning news coverage and was calling with an offer that would prove to be the turning point the family desperately needed. "Sarah, I've been watching the news about what happened to your family," Dr. Martinez said, her voice warm with genuine concern. "I know this is probably the last thing on your mind right now, but I have a proposition that might help with your immediate housing situation." Dr. Martinez explained that the hospital maintained several on-call apartments for medical staff who needed to stay close to the facility during emergencies. One of these units had been vacant for the past month and could accommodate the Mitchell family, including Rex, for as long as necessary while they sorted out their long-term housing situation. "The apartment isn't large," Dr. Martinez warned, "but it's fully furnished and pet-friendly. The hospital board approved temporary housing assistance for staff members facing catastrophic emergencies, and I can't think of a better example than what your family has been through. Sarah felt her first glimmer of hope since the crisis began. Dr. Martinez, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dr. Martinez replied. There's a condition. The local news stations have been calling the hospital all morning, wanting to interview you about Rex's heroic actions. The hospital's public relations department thinks this could be a wonderful opportunity to highlight our commitment to supporting staff during emergencies. Would you be willing to do one interview to help us share this positive story? Sarah looked at David, who nodded his agreement. After everything they'd been through, sharing their story seemed like a small price to pay for stable housing and the chance to keep their family together. The climax of their ordeal came that afternoon during the live television interview with Channel 7 News. Sarah, David, Emma, and Rex were positioned in the hospital's conference room, with afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows and creating a warm, hopeful atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the darkness of the previous night. This is really a story about the incredible bond between humans and animals. Reporter Amanda Cross began, her tone much more respectful than it had been during the morning's ambush interviews. Rex, can you tell us about this amazing dog who saved your family? As if understanding that this was his moment to shine, Rex sat perfectly still beside Emma's carrier, his noble head raised and his alert eyes focused on the camera. His calm, confident demeanor was a stark contrast to the stressed, protective behavior he'd exhibited throughout the morning. Rex has been our guardian angel since the day we brought him home, Sarah explained, her voice steady and filled with genuine emotion. But last night, he became our hero in the most literal sense. He didn't just save Emma's life, he saved our entire family. David picked up the narrative describing Rex's unusual behavior in the hours leading up to the fire and the dog's decisive action in removing Emma from danger. What amazes me most is that Rex didn't panic, David said. He had a plan and he executed it perfectly. He knew what needed to be done and he did it. The emotional peak of the interview came when Dr. Foster, who had remained with the family throughout the day, explained the scientific basis for Rex's actions. German Shepherds were bred to make independent decisions to protect their charges, she said. Rex demonstrated exactly the kind of intelligence and protective instinct that makes these dogs so valuable as working animals. He literally smelled danger that humans couldn't detect and took appropriate action to neutralize the threat. But the real climax occurred when Amanda Cross asked Sarah what she wanted people to learn from their experience. Sarah paused for a moment, looking at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, and Rex, sitting alertly beside them. I think the most important lesson is that heroes come in all forms, she said finally. We spend so much time worrying about external threats and obvious dangers that we sometimes miss the real risks hiding in our own homes. Rex didn't just save us from a fire, he saved us from our own complacency. The interview concluded with Rex performing a simple trick, shaking hands with the reporter while maintaining his dignified composure. The image of the noble German Shepherd graciously accepting recognition for his heroic actions would become the defining photograph of the story. The aftermath of the Mitchell family's ordeal unfolded over the following months in ways that none of them could have anticipated. The television interview generated an overwhelming response from the community, with dozens of people offering everything from temporary housing to financial assistance to help the family rebuild their lives. The most significant development came from an unexpected source, a local electrical contractor named Mike Stevens, who had seen the interview and was moved by the family's story. Stevens had recently lost his own dog to cancer and was inspired by Rex's heroic actions to offer his services at cost to completely renovate the Mitchell home's electrical system. What that dog did for your family is exactly what my old dog Max would have done, Stevens told David during their first meeting. I can't bring Max back, but I can make sure Rex's sacrifice wasn't in vain by making your home the safest house on Maple Street. The insurance company, influenced by the positive media coverage and the clear evidence that the fire was caused by pre-existing electrical problems rather than negligence, approved the family's claim in full. The settlement provided enough money not only to repair the fire damage, but to upgrade their entire home with modern safety systems. Sarah returned to work at Millbrook General with a new perspective on her role as a pediatric nurse. Her experience with Emma's near miss had given her deeper empathy for families facing medical emergencies, and she found herself better able to support parents dealing with crisis situations. Dr. Martinez promoted her to a supervisory position, recognizing her enhanced skills and her value as a representative of the hospital's commitment to staff welfare. David's employer, Millbrook Insurance Services, ultimately used the family's story as a training example for new adjusters, highlighting the importance of thorough home safety inspections and the value of taking electrical problems seriously. Rather than facing termination, David found himself in greater demand as an adjuster who truly understood the human cost of home disasters. The Mitchell family moved back into their renovated home 3 months after the fire, but it was a fundamentally different place than the house they'd left. Every room now featured state-of-the-art smoke detectors linked to a central monitoring system. The electrical panel had been completely replaced with modern components, and every outlet in the house included ground fault circuit interrupters to prevent electrical fires. Emma's nursery was rebuilt with enhanced safety features, including air quality monitors and a direct communication system to her parents' bedroom. But the most important addition was a custom-built bed for Rex, positioned where he could maintain his protective watch over the baby while remaining comfortable throughout the night. Rex himself emerged from the experience with a new status in the community. The Millbrook Fire Department appointed him as an honorary fire dog, complete with his own badge and regular visits to local schools to teach children about fire safety. Dr. Foster used Rex's story in her research on canine protective behaviors, contributing to a better understanding of how working dogs can be trained to detect and respond to household emergencies. The family's relationship with Rex deepened beyond mere pet ownership to something approaching true partnership. They invested in advanced training that would allow Rex to better communicate specific types of dangers, and they modified their daily routines to include regular safety checks that took advantage of the dog's superior sensory capabilities. Perhaps most importantly, the Mitchell family's story became a catalyst for change throughout their community. The Millbrook City Council passed new ordinances requiring annual electrical safety inspections for all residential properties. and the fire department launched an educational campaign about the early warning signs of household electrical problems. On quiet evenings, as Sarah rocked Emma to sleep in the rebuilt nursery while Rex maintained his faithful vigil nearby, she often reflected on how a single night of terror had ultimately made their family stronger, safer, and more connected than they'd ever been before. Rex's heroic actions had saved more than just their lives. They'd saved their faith in the possibility that protection and love could come from the most unexpected sources. The hero dog, who had dragged a sleeping baby out of a burning house at 3 a.m., had done more than prevent a tragedy. He had demonstrated that true loyalty meant being willing to act on incomplete information, to risk misunderstanding and punishment in order to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. In the end, Rex's story became proof that sometimes the most important heroes are the ones who never expect recognition, who act purely from instinct and love, and who remind us that courage often comes in forms we might not immediately recognize. The German Shepherd, who had shocked his family by dragging their baby into the night, had ultimately taught them the most valuable lesson of all, that safety isn't just about the systems we install or the precautions we take, but about the bonds we build with those who have committed their lives to protecting ours.